Hello and welcome back to another live edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast brought to you by manscaped.com. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou, and I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hello and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast brought to you by manscaped.com. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou, and I'm delighted to be joined by a national newspaper journalist, one of the best commentators in the business, and a top lad. It's Alex Crook. Alex, welcome to the show, mate. How are you, first of all?
Afternoon, Harry. Nice to see you. Thank you for the big build-up.
No problem at all. Delighted to have you on the show and delighted to get into your brand new book. Tell us about it. Arsenal, Match of My Life. Really interested about this book because it's a concept I think is brilliant. Getting sort of views on some of the club's most historic matches through the eyes of those that participated in them. I think it's a fantastic concept, first of all. How did it kind of come about?
That's right. I have a copy of the book here. As you say, Arsenal, Match of My Life. It's actually the latest in a series. Pitch Publisher are the brainchild behind it, and basically, as you say, they've done it with various clubs, Manchester United and Liverpool amongst them. I've actually produced previous books involving Bournemouth and Southampton, and each chapter is basically a memorable game viewed through the eyes of someone who was involved. I think we've covered all eras here. Just the contents page, we put it bang up to date with Theo Walcott remembering the 4-0 victory against Aston Villa in the FA Cup final. I'm sure a day you remember well, Harry. And then we're going right down to the 1970-71 double winning season. Frank McClintock remembering how Arsenal famously won the league at White Hart Lane first time round. We've done that more recently as well. David O'Leary looks back on Juventus nil, Arsenal won a famous away European victory. We've got Perry Groves in there, Paul Davis. Bobby Gould actually talked about defeat in the League Cup final against Swindon, the Don Rogers final. He scored at Wembley, but he admits to crying as he came out the tunnel because the pitch, having just hosted the Horse of the Year show, was in such dismal shape. We've got Charlie Nicholas in there. That's a really interesting chapter. He talks about his maverick nature and the fact that maybe Arsenal didn't really suit that style. And in particular, a conversation he had with George Graham before George Graham was appointed Arsenal manager. He was at Millwall at the time. They used to drink in the same pub. Apparently one day over a pint, George Graham said, "I don't know why you joined Arsenal. You're not an Arsenal player." Charlie Nicholas feared the worst, it's fair to say, when George Graham was appointed as Arsenal manager a few weeks later.
I could imagine. I could only imagine. I'm sure it's full of some fantastic stories. And just as Alex mentioned, here it is. You can see it on your screens now. Arsenal, Match of My Life. It is available in a number of stores. Am I right, Alex? It's on. I've seen it on Amazon. Can people get it anywhere else as well?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. It's also in stock at Waterstones. And I have some signed copies as well. I've been going out and doing a series of signing sessions. I've still got some Bob Wilson copies left. What an absolute gentleman he was when I went to meet him at his house in Dorset. I've also got Perry Groves, my Talksport colleague, and I'm hoping next week that Ray Parler and Theo Walcott will also sign some copies. So just follow me on Twitter, Alex_Crook. Send me a DM and I can arrange a signed copy delivered to your door.
Fantastic. You've mentioned lots and lots of excellent names in there and some Arsenal legends who have left a huge impact on the club over the years. You mentioned to me when we were talking about it, Andre Arshavin, somebody who, I guess has kind of gone off the radar a little bit since he left Arsenal, I think. You see him pop up now and again sort of from various media outlets. How did the Andre Arshavin bit come about?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we had a fair representation, and obviously foreign players have played a key part in Arsenal's history. We weren't necessarily aiming for the likes of Thierry Henry and Robert Pires, because I kind of think that they've said all there is to say about their Arsenal careers. So we were looking a bit more niche. I tracked down John Jensen in Denmark, and he remembers the game where he scored his only Arsenal goal, famously, against Queen's Park Rangers. Another defeat. But John tells a lovely story. In his home in Denmark, he has 3 pieces of memorabilia from his playing career. The Danish shirt that he won the European Cup in, European Championships back in the early 90s. The Arsenal shirt that he wore when they won the FA Cup against Sheffield Wednesday. And also in a frame is the T-shirt the club actually produced saying, I was there when John Jensen scores. That shows how much that moment means to him and, of course, to Arsenal supporters. But you're right, Andrei Arshavin was a bit of a challenge because we wanted him to talk about that 4-4 game against Liverpool. 4 goals at Anfield. What an achievement. He actually says in the book it wasn't the most favourite game of his career, but he acknowledges the achievement. We actually tracked him down at Zenit St. Petersburg via a Russian-speaking journalist. It's a really nice chap. He talks about when he first arrived at Emirates Stadium and it was snowing. He said it was almost like being in Moscow. And he also talks about that League Cup final defeat to Birmingham and the fact that actually he failed to put any silverware in the trophy cabinet when he was at Arsenal, and some of the reasons behind that. So I think Arsenal fans will enjoy reading his memories, full of admiration, as everybody is really, for Arsene Wenger, calls him the professor, but says he had a kind side to him as well in the way he treated players and also a particular eye for young players. So I think it's an interesting read.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. And again, guys, if you haven't, or you're looking for something to get for Christmas, with Christmas around the corner, this is the perfect thing. So check out Match of My Life, featuring lots and lots of stories from some of Arsenal's greatest ever players. I can imagine, Alex, a lot of work goes on behind the scenes with something like this, doesn't it? Because it's not just about writing it up or conducting the actual interviews. It's about tracking down the people that you want to speak to. It's about finding them, getting them to agree to do it as well. What were some of the challenges that you faced when putting this book together?
Well, this book is actually 4 years in the making because I first touted the idea to the publisher back in 2016, and due to my commitments with Talksport and other life events getting in the way, I never got round to it until lockdown. And suddenly I thought, well, what am I going to do for lockdown?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to write that book. And the challenges were really, I'm not necessarily associated with Arsenal. My patch historically has been down the South Coast, hence the fact I've done Southampton and Bournemouth versions of this book. So I was almost cold calling people and saying, would you like to contribute? We had a couple of setbacks early on. Andy Linnigan, for example, we tracked down him, who now works as a plumber, which some Arsenal fans might not know. So we called his work number. He abruptly declined the chance to run that game when he scored in the cup final against Sheffield Wednesday. That was a setback. So it wasn't without its challenges. Not everybody we approached wanted to partake. We did ask Liam Brady as well. Unfortunately, he declined. So we had to really build relationships from scratch. I think a big breakthrough day, if you like. We managed to get George Graham to agree to write the foreword. We managed to track down Charlie George and indeed Frank McClintock, three big names from Arsenal's past. And once they all came on board, we thought actually this project has got some legs. But we had to call in a lot of favours for contact numbers. Adrian Clark, who you probably know well, was very helpful on that front in terms of getting in touch with people. And eventually it came together. And I think the list we got, I mean, I've mentioned most of the names there, but also Paul Davis, of course, played an awful lot of games. And he talks in his chapter about the racism that he and his fellow black players had to endure during the 1980s. That chapter was actually serialised in the Sun newspaper. Some of your subscribers may have seen that. But that was a different chapter as well. Obviously, I used my Talksport connections. Ray Parler is there, remembering the double and that game at Old Trafford when he actually played a little bit intoxicated, shall we say, and produced a man of the match performance when Phil Van Dijk scored that famous goal. Lee Dixon talks about Anfield 1989. Alan Smith was an absolute gentleman as well. So once we actually started to get phone numbers for these people, most people were more than happy to contribute.
Yeah, and you mentioned some brilliant people there. Adrian Clark, who's on this podcast fortnightly. Adrian's fantastic. Our listeners absolutely love listening to his analysis and insight. Frank McClintock's been on here as well. He's fantastic. And what an absolute gentleman he is. I mean, a quick little anecdote. When I got hold of Frank McClintock and asked him to come on the podcast, he didn't even say yes or no. He said to me, "Where do you live?" And I told him where I lived, and it happened to be literally 10 minutes from where he lives. and he said to me, well, I don't like all this internet stuff, so why don't you come over to my house for a cup of coffee and a muffin, he said, and we'll do it there. So I thought it was fantastic. I mean, what a welcoming man, and an absolute legend, and literally welcomed me into his home. I turned up with my laptop and my little microphones, and we done the job. It was excellent, and he's someone I've got immense respect for. So it's brilliant to hear that sort of people like that are, you know, contributed to this book, and I can imagine that the finished product is fantastic, and I can't wait to get into it. Just a couple of sort of questions that I had for you, Alex, as someone who obviously, I know you said that your main patch is kind of Southampton, Bournemouth and the South Coast sort of thing, but it's always interesting to hear about Arsenal from people who, I'm not going to say are detached, because I know you've got some excellent connections, but who maybe don't necessarily have that kind of invested interest in the club from a supporter's point of view as well, and can look at things a little bit more objectively. So Mikel Arteta's come in, he's taken over what I think was a very, very difficult job. It started sort of up and down, you know, the first sort of, the second half of last season wasn't great, but it finished on a high with the FA Cup win. Start of this campaign, there's been some question marks around Mikel Arteta and around the kind of approach in certain games. They lost their third game in the league just a few days ago, and it's kind of, I'm not going to say it's turned toxic, which we know can happen with the Arsenal fan base, but how have you assessed Mikel Arteta's early tenure as the Arsenal boss, and do you think that he does need more time and people should just get off his back?
I think he certainly needs more time, and I think he earned that time, and he's won the FA Cup in his first season, the first Arsenal manager to do that since the great George Graham. That is some company to be keeping, and also they did it the hard way when you look at the teams that they beat, not least Manchester City, en route to the final, and then of course Chelsea as well, and I thought it was a tactical masterclass in both those games from Mikel Arteta. I think he has a bit about him. I think he's got a steel and a determination. I don't think the Mesut Ozil scenario is doing anybody any great favours at the moment. It's created a sideshow, and the fact that Arsenal are not winning games and not particularly creating chances as well. People are always going to say, well, you've got Mesut Ozil on your books, why would you not just pick him in the squad? There has to be more to that particular story than meets the eye. I think where he's improved Arsenal certainly is defensively. You look a lot more solid now. They just need to start firing in the attacking third again. I mean, the form of Aubameyang, I think, would be a concern since signing his new contract. I don't necessarily think the two are connected. I think it's an unfortunate coincidence, and people say, well, he's put his feet up now, he's got his money. I don't think Aubameyang is that type of character. And if you look at the games you have lost as well, it's been a tricky start to the season. The fact you had to go to Anfield early on, and Leicester, who are better away from home at this moment in time than they are at King Power Stadium. So I don't think it's a disaster. I think it's such an open season now. Actually, even the fact that Arsenal have lost those three matches, they're still not out of contention for a place in the top four by any stretch of the imagination, because a lot of the other so-called big six are struggling to put together a run of consistent results as well. It's going to be a strange season.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to get your thoughts a little bit on the kind of Arsene Wenger scenario as well, because you mentioned him when talking about some of the legends and what Andrei Arshavin had to say about him. He's obviously released his book quite recently. I think a lot of Arsenal fans were expecting to see him maybe expose some truths that, you know, maybe or express sort of his account of some events that unfolded during his tenure. He didn't do that. Nobody really, I don't think anybody sensible really thought that Wenger was going to do that. It's not in his character. But looking at it from kind of the outside in, were you surprised by the toxic nature of some of the kind of protests towards getting him out the door? You know, he is a legend. He is a club legend, an absolute gentleman as well. And it only takes to see some of his media appearances in promoting this book to realise what a fantastic man he is. Did you find it a little bit sort of uneasy looking on and seeing the way he was being treated?
Yeah, I did. And obviously we've got Piers Morgan, who has penned the epilogue for this book. And I was a bit uneasy about that, to be honest, because what I didn't want it to turn into was an Arsene Wenger bashing session. I have to say, in fairness to Piers, who's been a good promoter of the book as well on his social media, he didn't do that. He acknowledged the fantastic times, the fantastic players that Arsene Wenger brought to the club. But he did say that he probably stayed on for too long. And I think it's a delicate balancing act. It's very hard when you've been synonymous for one club as he was, to know when to walk away. Interestingly, Theo Walcott, in his chapter after that Aston Villa game, when Arsenal broke the record for the most FA Cup wins, he says he expected Arsene Wenger to go then. He said he was so emotional at the party afterwards that it almost felt like the Last Supper. Obviously, he stayed on and added more trophies, in fairness, but not the one that he really wanted in terms of getting them back to the top of the Premier League. But you look at the great Brian Clough. He's revered at Nottingham Forest, but actually his tenure ended in relegation from the Premier League, and he carried the look of a man who clearly stayed on for too long. I guess the direct comparison to Arsene Wenger will be Sir Alex Ferguson, who managed to time his departure to perfection, won the Premier League, arguably with the worst set of title winners, certainly that Manchester United have had, and then walked away. So it's very difficult, because I think when you've been a great manager, as Arsene Wenger clearly was, you always feel you've got one last hurrah. Sadly, he didn't quite have that in terms of the Premier League or the Champions League, which again, George Graham in the foreword says actually there were teams under Arsene Wenger that should really have conquered Europe. They never quite managed it. But I think most Arsenal fans now, most reasonable-minded Arsenal fans, would look back and say Arsene Wenger gave us the best football that we're ever going to see. You're never going to replicate that. And again, to take the conversation full circle back to Mikel Arteta, it's like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Manchester United. I think fans just have to realise it's never going to be quite the same again. But whoever is in the hot seat shouldn't be judged against Arsene Wenger or Sir Alex Ferguson, because they're two such unique characters, two one-offs. I don't think we're ever going to see a period in the Premier League again when you've got two such great forces colliding as United and Arsenal did on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Going back to the book, Alex, you mentioned quite a few of the different chapters and the different contributors. Which one to you stands out? You know, if you said to me, Harry, you've only got time to read one chapter in this book, which one would it be for you? Which one is the one?
That is a tough question. Obviously, I co-wrote it with Pat Symeou, a journalistic colleague of a long time. My favourite chapter in terms of doing the interview and writing it up was probably Charlie Nicholas, because he was so honest about the fact that possibly Arsenal was the wrong club for him, but why he always loved playing against Tottenham, and that brought the best out of him. Also, his champagne lifestyle with George Best and that champagne Charlie nickname, some of the managers that he played under as well. I think if you want brutal honesty, then you should read that one. In terms of revelations, I don't want to give too much away, but Frank McClintock tells a really interesting story about a tunnel exchange in the marble halls at Highbury involving him and Don Revie. Let's just say that the offer that Don Revie made to Frank McClintock didn't go down particularly well.
Fantastic. I can't wait to read it. It sounds excellent, and just from the people that are involved and some of the kind of little giveaways that you've given us today, you can tell what a fantastic read it is, and I'm very, very much looking forward to that. Just finally, Alex, sort of Arsenal take on Manchester United this weekend. It's a big game, I think, probably for both sides. Manchester United come into this having obviously got a really impressive win against Leipzig in midweek. Arsenal with a win, but against an opponent that, you know, everybody expected them to beat. A little bit of pressure on Mikel Arteta to maybe open his team up a little bit, maybe be a little bit more expansive. Me personally, I don't think that that's the game to be trying this in. I think stick to what has worked in a lot of the big games since he took over. But how do you kind of see this one going? Who do you make as favourites, and what can we expect at the weekend?
It's very hard to predict both teams. I think actually both teams' season is at a bit of a tipping point. If you look at the league table, clearly both would like to be higher. Both have performed well at times, but also have underperformed. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the two managers. What I hope we don't get is a repeat of the stalemate that Manchester United served up last time they were at home in the Premier League against Chelsea. A dire 0-0 draw. I think United will be more offence-minded, will be a bit more ambitious in this game. I think you're right what you say about Mikel Arteta. I think he will try and soak up the pressure and try and play in the counter-attack. I don't think this is the game to take the shackles off, especially with United high in confidence following events in midweek. It's going to be interesting for me what he does with that forward line, you know, because obviously he experimented with Willian in the false number 9 position. That didn't really work. I personally think Aubameyang is still better suited coming in from the left-hand side and wreaking havoc that way, but I'm not sure that Lacazette and Aubameyang will play together. It tends to be that Mikel Arteta doesn't play the two big hitters against the biggest clubs in the country. So I think there are selection headaches for him. But if Arsenal bring their A game, then certainly they can go to Old Trafford and pick up a result. If they start poorly and Manchester United's tails are up, it could be a difficult afternoon. And this is not a ground where, as you know, Harry, Arsenal fare particularly well in the Premier League era.
Yeah, it's one of those fixtures that I look at and I go, oh, can we just skip past this one? I don't want it. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's going to be a really interesting game. And I was actually working on the United-Chelsea game last weekend, and that was an absolute snooze fest. So let's hope that
you got double your fee.
I didn't, unfortunately. But I can tell you one thing. Never have I used my notes so much during a game of football. There you go. It wasn't a good... Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a great encounter at all. Quick reminder, guys, of where you can find Arsenal Match of My Life by Alex Crook and Pat Symeou, forward by George Graham. Alex has told you guys all about some of the fantastic contributors that have been involved in this project. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it at Waterstones, all major bookstores. So check it out. It will make the perfect Christmas present with the festive period just around the corner. And, well, we're all in lockdown, so we've got plenty of time at home to be reading. And what better than to read some of these fantastic stories. Alex, how can people keep up with you on social media and keep in touch with the excellent work that you do?
Yeah, as I say, my Twitter handle is Alex_Crook. I'm pretty active on there. Never short of an opinion or two. And I have to say I've got a vested interest in Arsenal because my wife is a massive Arsenal supporter. So I will quite often be tweeting about them, and she gives me chapter on verse on exactly what's going on at the Emirates.
Fantastic. Good to know she's got great taste as well. Excellent stuff. Brilliant. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to leave a link to order the book in the description of this podcast. So if you fancy checking it out, just hit the link. It will take you straight to the page. Place your order. Alex has mentioned that he's got some signed copies available as well. How can people reach out regarding those? Twitter? Does Twitter work?
My DMs are open. As I say, I've got a few Perry Groves copies left and a very select few of Bob Wilson as well. And I'm seeing Theo Walcott next week, and I'll collar Ray Parlour after one of his Talksport breakfast shows to pen his signature as well. So Alex_Crook, send me a DM and I'll send you all the details that you need.
Brilliant stuff. Please do check that out. Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, mate. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we can speak to you again soon. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. Good luck for the weekend.
Thank you very much. That was the brilliant Alex Crook. This has been the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, an Arsenal Match of My Life special. Check it out. Available on all major bookstores, and we'll be back very soon with another podcast. So keep your eyes peeled. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and give Alex a follow on Twitter. Until next time, take care. Ciao.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.